It's nearing 4 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon in the Southwest Pacific. The date is May 1st, 2000. MS World Discoverer glides through the Sandfly Passage, a channel in the Solomon Islands known for its deep tranquility and picturesque forests. But it's also a nightmare navigational challenge with unpredictable currents and uncharted rocky reefs. Nearly 100 passengers on board are halfway through a 19-day cruise. They perch on the outer decks or hang over the railings and watch the turquoise waters below glimmering. The air is warm and sticky. In the distance, a tropical rainstorm is brewing, and those not glued to the railings watching the jungle-lined coast are happily asleep in deck chairs. Since leaving port in Fiji 11 days ago, passengers have soaked up the scenic views of the islands to the east of Papua New Guinea, captivated by the glassy lagoons and the dense jungle. So far, the holiday has been idyllic, but as the passengers ease into the languor of the late afternoon and wonder what they'll be served for dinner, they're blissfully unaware of what's unfolding in the wheelhouse and what lies ahead. Captain Oliver Kreuss and his officers keep alert on the bridge as you notice the deep blue of the channel begin to lighten to the cyan shade of shallow waters. He inspects his chart squarely, deciphering the best passage across the hazardous expanse of shoals and reefs. Not every obstacle is marked on the map. He and his crew will have to use their best judgment to guide their ship safely through the narrow corridor between the islands. But then, without warning, it happens. From far below comes a grinding. Steel is torn like paper. Passengers rush to look over the side. Their ship has struck something. A reef. She's already sinking. Captain Kreuss has minutes to act. As the tropical rains roll in, what he decides to do next will either save his ship and passengers or doom them. This is the World Discoverer today, abandoned, decrepit. For nearly 30 years now, she's been sat where she came to rest, and now she's a haunt for seabirds and lizards. But once upon a time, she'd been a home for intrepid travellers. She'd been a long-term charter of society expeditions, carting adventure seekers to remote areas of the globe from hemisphere to hemisphere. Passengers were promised intimate guided tours of tropical islands and ringside seats to king penguins, elephant seals, and majestic fjords from South Georgia Island to Norway. It wasn't just adventure that was promised, but luxury. If you wanted to go to Antarctica with white tablecloths and white gloves, it was the only way to go. But even adventure luxury travel is not immune to the whims of Mother Nature, and Discoverer's passengers would soon find the adventure they had been promised would become a little more adventurous than they might have bargained for. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your friend Mike Brady from Ocean Liner Designs, and this is the story of the World Discoverer and how a leading expedition cruise ship became an abandoned hulk. The 1970s, a world high on the effects of free love and psychedelia. Dissatisfied with the standard toffee-nosed travel that would see you observe marvels from an aloof and out-of-touch distance, passengers are starting to explore the world in a new and exciting way. Travel is beginning to shift, and the desire to go off the beaten track takes over. Craving real and authentic experiences that allow you to bus, ride, or trek your way to remote and untouched areas, tourists are helping the advent of adventure travel take place. Europeans and Americans voyage from the Middle East to Southeast Asia on the legendary hippie trail. The Australian Himalayan expeditions pioneer trekking holidays in Nepal, and the still running top deck tours cart backpackers from London all the way to Kathmandu. As adventure travel grows, so do the companies eager to capitalise on the desire to see real and raw wonders up close. One of those companies is Adventure Cruises Inc., guided by a mission to take travellers to far-flung corners of the globe, to do so in style. In all honesty, while their offering evolved to be more sophisticated and luxurious than, say, a bunch of Aussies crammed into a dinghy or a sweaty bus gallivanting around Turkey, Adventure Cruises effectively rode the success wave of adventure travel. They just improved on it. The company would transport people to remote, faraway places they might have only seen in encyclopedias or documentaries, but they'd do so in luxury. In 1976, Adventure Cruises snatched a cruise ship named Discoverer off a financially plummeting Danish adventure travel known as Biwa Cruises. Discoverer is recognised as really only the second expedition cruise ship of her kind, and once she's in Adventure Cruises' possession, she's swiftly registered in Singapore, and renamed World Discoverer. World Discoverer had been purpose-built by German shipbuilders at Schichau Unterwasser in 1974 for her original Danish owners, and her design was very impressive. She had a double-hull construction that could withstand ice, growlers, or fields when moving through the furthest corners of the Northwest Passage that would be unsafe for regular cruise ships. To help her globetrotting capabilities, she was compact, just 287 feet or 87 meters long, only a little bit longer than a Boeing 747 jet. Her slight size meant she'd be able to easily call at smaller ports or shallower anchorages that other bigger ships couldn't hope to reach. Her twin diesel engines powered a single propeller that gave her a good bit of grunt, but she wasn't fast. As a cruise ship, she didn't really need to be. And that classification as a Swedish-Finnish 1A ice-class vessel allowed her to operate in icy conditions with only minimal icebreaker assistance. On her later Antarctic voyages, she knifed easily through tough ice and slate-grey water, offering some 130 passengers magnificent views of glacier fronts and towering icebergs. But if just watching from the deck wasn't enough, Discoverer's passengers were treated to the ship's fleet of inflatable Zodiac landing rafts. Bundled in parkas and life vests, passengers could safely glide through freezing water in the Zodiacs to watch elephant seals vegetating on ice floes up close. Discoverer was a purpose-built adventure pleasure palace for a very privileged few, and she soon proved to be very popular. The 1980s proved to be World Discoverer's heyday. Shortly after Adventure Cruises Inc. took ownership of Discoverer in the late 1970s, she became a long-term charter to Society Expeditions, a company that became her primary manager for most of her time spent carrying passengers to untouched areas of the globe. During the austral summer months, she made her Antarctic voyages, transporting passengers to research stations and volcanic hills in King George and Deception Islands. From March through May, she would cruise around the South Pacific Islands, and passengers could hop off to hike mountains. But in June, World Discoverer moved north to Alaska and the Arctic. In the Zodiacs, passengers could get up close and personal to the incredible wildlife, while on land, members of indigenous Arctic cultures delivered seminars on their rich customs and rituals. But no matter what the destination, passengers on board could expect an intimate and cozy spirit. With just 75 cabins, she felt less like a cruise ship and more like a well-travelled private yacht. Given the frequent excursions to land and the communal deck spaces, passengers became familiar with each other, and it fostered the idea that this was an expedition, even though in reality it was really just an on-the-rails joyride. Before heading to breakfast in the morning, passengers could hit the gym or swim laps in the pool. Dinner was served a la carte in the Marco Polo dining room, and the food was always a hot topic of conversation. The ship was known for its world-class chefs. No two dinners were ever the same, so passengers were treated to a rotating palette of cuisines paired with fine wine and champagne. For the first and last days of the cruise, it was customary to dress in your best as the captain joined his complement for dinner. After a fine meal, passengers could retire to either of the two bars, the small cinema or the library. But what really set Discoverer apart from her competitors was her hospitable and ever-attentive crew. Society Expeditions hired a small group of expedition leaders with diverse backgrounds in sciences like marine biology, history, and geology. They gave insightful lectures on the natural habitats of the cruise's various destinations and expert guidance on how to care for and protect the land. Conservation was a key topic. Society Expeditions was skilled at offering a diverse travel experience. Comfortable amenities on board married with immersive boots-on-the-ground activities off-ship, a kind of ocean-going glamping. Passengers had to pay for the privilege, though. For a 13-day Antarctica cruise, rates ranged anywhere from $5,000 to $9,500 US, bearing in mind this was in the 80s, while the more pricier voyages, up to 21 days, could reach up to $12,000. As the last decade of the century arrived, with it came Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, triggering an oil price shock and a recession in the US. This badly disrupted tourism, and it cast doubt over the future of companies like Society Expeditions. In early 1992, they were forced to cancel a purchase of a new ship, the Society Adventurer, and file for protection from their creditors. While Society Expeditions navigated financial challenges, World Discoverer was chartered by Clipper Adventure Cruises, and she oscillated between cruising through the Panama Canal, hugging the coast of Brazil, and venturing down to Antarctica. But after being appointed the new president of Society Expeditions in 1999, 28-year industry veteran Tom Russell was quick to make ambitious plans. He wanted to build 2 new vessels capable of carrying 160 passengers and also refurbish the now 25-year-old World Discoverer, which would come back into service with the line the next spring. Russell believed Society's eye-watering prices would actually keep their cruises in high demand over the competition. Society Expeditions, he hoped, would be the hot topic of conversation amongst seasoned travellers, and it sure would be, but just not in the way that he'd hoped for. That April, the first of the new millennium, a pack of jet-setters on board World Discoverer were in for an unforgettable trip through the Solomon Islands. It had started in Fiji on the 19th, when passengers, mostly Germans and Americans, had streamed aboard excitedly at Nadi. The itinerary would see World Discoverer head northwest for 19 days, zipping between the Fijian Islands before making for Vanuatu and then the Santa Cruz chain. There, she would make for the Solomon Islands, and then over to Papua New Guinea for a brief stop before ending the voyage at Guam. With about 100 tourists on board and 80 crew to look after them, the ship set off for a voyage to remember, one it would never return from. Life on board was fun, and for those who'd come from far afield, the tropics offered unique sights, sounds, and smells. US Judge Gerald Rushfeldt and his artist wife Joy had flown from Kansas. They, along with their shipboard companions, had delighted in the journey so far. Local islanders had danced for them and performed traditional ceremonies. The more audacious of the passengers had tried scuba diving or snorkeling, and at night time, the society lecturers gave enthralling talks on the flora and fauna that surrounded their ship. Just over halfway through the trip, World Discoverer had left Santa Ana, on the southernmost tip of San Cristobal, and chugged northwest. But here, Captain Kreuss decided to make a slight change to the itinerary. World Discoverer would motor right through the indispensable strait, with Guadalcanal on their left and Malaita on their right. She'd call into a legendary stretch of water, Iron Bottom Sound. This had been the scene of some of the fiercest fighting of the Second World War's Pacific theatre. Maybe it's because so many of the passengers on this voyage were Americans, so Iron Bottom Sound would be of great interest. But whatever the reason, World Discoverer changed course, and now passengers would be treated to the sight of spectacular mountain ranges covered in thick, dense jungle on either side of their ship. Steaming jungles surround the World Discoverer as she swings into the Sandfly Passage, a tight stretch between the islands of Ngelasula and Mboko-Nimbeti. This is a place the locals refer to as Toni Kama, or the Wind Woman. Legend says it's up to her to decide if someone has good permission or not to pass through. For World Discoverer, that day, the Wind Woman is dubious, and she mulls over whether to grant the ship access. The passage may look idyllic, but it presents a series of navigational challenges even to the most experienced of skippers. The southwestern channel entrance spans just about 1 kilometre, 4,000 feet between the towering rocky cliff on Horn Point and the reef to the north at Native Point. Here, the water's deep, 300 feet or 91 metres. It opens up into a wide body of water with bays and inlets, but the width is deceptive. By the time a ship has reached halfway through the passage, the depth has already halved. The northern channel is just as narrow as the southern, but it is positively blocked off by an underwater wall of reefs and rocky outcrops sitting mid-channel. Only one small passage maintains depth enough for World Discoverer to pass through. Either side of her will be reefs covered only by 30 or so feet of water, or less. But Captain Kreuss and his officers are confident that the charts they have will guide them to safety. Their ship slowly makes its way through the channel. Above, storm clouds rumble. Rain has been spotty that day, but clearly it's about to really open up. Up in the crow's nest, passengers look out across the ship's bow at the beaches and rocky coves that surround them. This is the highest point in the ship, a glazed observation station that's very popular on rainy days. Gerald Rushfeldt and a few others look out over the ship's bow. They're surprised to see something out ahead of them. It appears at first as a lighter patch of water, turquoise instead of dark blue. It can only be one thing: a reef. Beneath them on the bridge, World Discoverer's crew must have seen it too. They rush to haul the ship's wheel over to port, and she slowly begins to come around, but it's too late. Collision is totally unavoidable. A violent shudder rips through the ship's hull. Those that had been enjoying a lazy afternoon suddenly feel everything vibrate around them. They hear a loud groan as the steel hull of the ship roars in metallic pain. It goes on for agonizing seconds before suddenly, silence. The ship has come to a complete stop. Her propeller thrashes away in the water, but then the engines stop and the familiar soothing hum of the ship's mechanical heart is gone. A hush falls over World Discoverer. Disaster has come quickly, and she's stuck fast. Captain Kreuss's familiar voice comes over the speakers as passengers mill uncertainly about. He calls for them to don their life jackets and report to their assigned muster stations. The peaceful afternoon lull has suddenly been replaced by palpable uncertainty, but panic doesn't break out. Instead, a calm, orderly process begins. Crew usher passengers to their designated groups and the lounge fills as people file in. The vessel creaks and the deck seems to tilt to starboard ever so slightly, but then Kreuss's voice beams again. Everyone must remain seated in their muster groups, he says. The ship has struck a reef. The extent of the damage is unknown, but Kreuss doesn't want to hang around long enough to find out. If the ship slips off the reef at an awkward angle, she could roll right over. Instead, he announces his intent to reverse her off. The engines rumble into life once again, and the ship's hull trembles. World Discoverer strains, working against the coral that threatens to rip open her hull even further. After what seems like an eternity, there's a groan, low and slow, and a rumble as the cruise ship dislodges itself and floats once again, but something's not right. She is leaning further over to starboard. Clearly, the hull has been torn through, and World Discoverer is flooding fast. The bridge crew reassemble and deduce the state of the vessel. A gaping hole yawns open in the ship's hull somewhere far below. The damage must be bad. The World Discoverer had been built with collisions in mind, and her hull was reinforced for ice. That would only protect her from slight impacts. Grounding on a reef would tear through the steel with ease. She was never designed to survive something like that. But Captain Kreuss remains calm. Maybe his ship can be saved, but for now, he has his passengers to worry about. The Mayday crackles over the radio waves, and he orders the boats swung out and loaded. As passengers begin to slowly file into the 4 big lifeboats, the heavens open up, and tropical rain dumps down on them. The evacuation has begun. The passengers are orderly. The crew are managing it well, but they're soon confronted with a problem. One boat on the starboard side is stuck, loaded with passengers. It can't lower. They're told to get out and try one of the boats on the port side instead. Metal chains clang and the lines squeak as 2 of the boats go over the side safely. But Gerald and Joy Rushfeld are distressed to find that their boat can't be launched either, because now the ship is listing too badly, and their boat is getting caught up on the hull. They're instructed to get out as well, and then file down into the lower decks of the ship to board the boats that have already been lowered. Below, passengers grasp tightly to the gunwales as boats motor as fast as they can to the edge of Ngella Island, only 270 metres or 300 yards away. The World Discoverer continues to list, and soon she's approaching a terrifying 20 degrees. It's hard to believe that passengers had been calmly enjoying the day just moments before. "We had to get out and go down some stairs to a lower deck," recalled passenger David Wright. The stairs were sloping, and so it was a bit dodgy. The passengers were red in the face and sweating a bit, but there was no panic. Captain Kreuss remains on board as the evacuation plays out. The boats are landing passengers on the white sandy beaches just a few hundred yards away, and he must be relieved to know that they're all safe. As rain tumbles down, his attention turns back to his ship. Clearly, with the worsening list, she's sinking, and soon she'll be rolled onto her side and lost for good. But he still has a chance at saving her. If he can run World Discoverer ashore on a sandy beach, the sinking can be halted. He makes his plan. He'll try to drive the ship ashore in nearby Roderick Bay. Her horns blare and Discoverer's engines thunder back into life. From the beach or the lifeboats, her passengers watch in awe as the listing vessel limps along, carving a long, slow path into the bay. She lumbers unhappily until it happens again. The familiar rumble underneath as the hull contacts the bottom. An outcropping of low-hanging trees is swept aside by her pointed prow. It was quite spectacular, David Wright remembered. When we reached the beach, we could see a tree hanging from the prow of the ship. With Discoverer now listing 46 degrees, her passengers and crew stare up at the ship that had been their happy home. Now she's leaning far over and presenting a very forlorn sight. But at least she's not sinking. With the ship at rest and stuck fast, World Discoverer's crew take the lay of the land. Following a path through the dense jungle reveals a clearing with conveniently placed palm shacks. Clearly this part of the island is a popular spot. Society had promised its passengers fine dining, and now it seems the loss of the ship won't be getting in the way of things. One of the ship's cooks sets up a canteen from things taken from the vessel and begins to prepare sandwiches, fruit and beverages. Soon, bedraggled groups of passengers are chowing down on snacks, surrounded by tropical foliage in what must have been a truly surreal experience. Adventure cruising, indeed. Meanwhile, back on board World Discoverer, other crewmen are working hard to save what passenger possessions can be got at. It's difficult work, especially with the ship stuck so hard on its side, but they kick in doors and sort through wardrobes to find what they can. Unfortunately, much of it is now underwater on the starboard side, and those passengers have only got away with what they're wearing. As the sun begins to set and Discoverer's searchlight shines on the beach, it becomes clear that everyone will need to settle in for a restless evening in the jungle. World Discoverer's distress call has been received, and a ferry is on its way over from Honiara, the capital of the Solomon Islands, about 35 miles or 58 kilometers away. Help should soon be at hand, but as the sunset turns to darkness, there's no sign of the thing. Everyone had hoped it would arrive by 7 p.m, but 2.5 hours later, it finally rumbles into view, the lights of its decks offering a reassuring sight, and rescue is at hand. It takes a few hours to load up as the boats zip back and forth under cover of darkness, but passengers begin to amble up the gangways and into their temporary home. They're not impressed by what they see. The ferry is only a small local coastal boat and it's full of roaches and ants, but at least it means they'll be going home soon. By midnight, the ferry rumbles off back to Guadalcanal, where finally the World Discoverer's passengers can prepare to be whisked back home. Everyone will be put up in a hotel for the night before flying to Brisbane and Sydney, and then back to where they came from. The exhausted passengers breathe a sigh of relief. Some had lost everything they'd set out with, but things could be far, far worse. It had certainly been a holiday to remember.
Thank goodness it was in the daytime, because at night it could have been the end. It really was very harrowing.
Daylight the next morning revealed the bizarre sight of World Discoverer lodged hard in the sand over on her starboard side. High tide had come and gone, and she hadn't moved, which was an ominous sign. Society Expeditions president Michael Lomax praised the captain and crew for their exemplary handling of the emergency, and while a beached ship was much better than a sunken one, now it was time to address just what to do about the jewel in Society Expeditions' crown that was now stuck on a beach in the Solomon Islands. With most of the ship still above the water, a proper salvage should have been straightforward enough. She'd need to have the holes made by the rock roughly patched before pumps could be run in to get the water out and refloat her. The list might have made things difficult, but engineers would never really get the chance to solve that problem because fate would soon intervene. Just over a month after World Discoverer had been beached, the Solomon Islands descended into armed chaos when the Prime Minister was taken hostage. This was the crescendo of months of tensions and occasional violence that saw the militants of the Malaita Eagle Force of the Northern Island stage an armed coup against the government of Guadalcanal. Sandwiched between the two sides was the poor old World Discoverer, and with roads blocked, thousands losing jobs, and farms being raided and destroyed, it was decided that efforts to refloat the big ship had to be postponed. Peace talks wouldn't come for many months yet. Some 200 people would die. TMC Marine, a maritime consultancy, reported that a breakdown in communications between salvors and local chiefs even resulted in shots being exchanged. All the while, World Discoverer sat and became more and more wedged in the sandy shore of her new island home. Not that she was ever totally abandoned. Locals had ransacked World Discoverer for anything and everything she was worth. Fixtures, wiring, plumbing, cabinets. Even glass from the ship's windows, it was all taken and repurposed. On top of all of that, an underwater survey revealed severe damage. Contact with the rocky reef had just ripped clean through the ship's side like tissue, and it would take weeks, months to repair, all in the middle of a tense, unstable conflict zone. Instead, World Discoverer was declared a total loss and written off. Being out of action for a few years was devastating for Society expeditions, and their troubles would only get worse. There came an ugly legal battle and a series of lawsuits over unpaid loans and charter fees. Society had commissioned a new ice-class ship to replace the old World Discoverer, but still, occupancy was down 60% and revenue was a pathetic $10 million in 2002. By 2007, Society was well and truly belly up, and the Bank of Scotland would have the upper hand. The great adventure travel company had racked up millions in debts to a showing of less than $50,000 in assets. Even worse, they owed shares to nearly 1,000 creditors. The bank seized the brand new World Discoverer while she was preparing for a cruise in Alaska, and passengers waiting to board with bags packed and spirits high were simply sent home. 2 weeks later, Society filed for liquidation bankruptcy, and the company was sucked into the maelstrom of its own making. But just what exactly had happened to the original World Discoverer is a bit of a mystery. Captain Kreuss and the ship's crew maintained she'd hit an uncharted reef or a rocky outcrop that didn't appear on maps of the area. The captain had taken his ship from the usual path through the Sandfly Passage. It must have been a risky move, knowing the passage was particularly nasty. Even so, he and his crew had performed superbly and got the ship fully evacuated with an impressive efficiency. There must have been an internal investigation, but no formal, official report was ever made. The ship was flagged to Liberia, and the disaster occurred in the middle of a government crisis in the Solomon Islands. There was just no formal investigation, no finding of wrongdoing or blame. The event simply faded from headlines. In fact, even finding sources for this script was an undertaking in and of itself. We had to rely almost entirely on what few contemporary news articles and passenger statements ran that May in 2000. The only reminder of that dramatic event is the World Discoverer herself. She remains exactly where Kreuss beached her, at the foot of Nagella Island, far over onto her side. From the davits, the blocks, which had launched her lifeboats 26 years ago, swing in the wind. Time has taken its toll. The surrounding natural landscape continues to wrap its arms around her. From above, she resembles a rusted tin can, covered in lichen and moss, with a forest of green trees sprouting on decks passengers had once sunbathed on and poking through windows. Unfortunately, the Solomon Island government doesn't have the budget or the machinery to lug Discoverer safely off the island. And following Society Expedition's bankruptcy, no one is legally responsible for her removal. It's hard to believe, when looking at World Discoverer now, she was once a superior expedition cruise ship that had travelled to distant areas of the world. She was only the second tourist-carrying cruise ship to cross the Northwest Passage, the famous shortcut from the Atlantic to the Arctic Ocean. Her passengers had lapped up the glory days of sophisticated adventure travel in the 1980s, setting sail on exploratory voyages nothing short of dreamlike. But what happens to MS World Discoverer next is Mother Nature's call. It's likely that over the next 50 years she'll simply sink into the sand and the water around her. Until then, she's a ghostly presence on the island and a big tourist draw. World Discoverer's passengers were lucky to find a clearing with small shacks when they had first landed, but today there are huts and even a beach bungalow for overnight stays in the lee of the ship's hulk. Visitors can walk right out to the bow on a specially built pier right off the beach. All these years later, expedition cruising is still big business. National Geographic Lindblad cruises demand top dollar for their unforgettable experiences, transporting passengers from Greenland to Newfoundland, Baja and Iceland, offering a New Year's cruise on the Danube to boot. But one of their skippers is none other than an affable German, Captain Oliver Kreuss, the man whose quick thinking had saved the lives of his passengers a quarter of a century ago, and the captain who almost managed to save his ship.